He suspected his maid was stealing from him. For 3 weeks, he watched her sneak out with bags she didn't bring in. So one night, he followed her, ready to catch her in the act. What he discovered left him speechless. Andrew Terry was 36 years old and owned half of Chicago. He noticed everything, every number, every detail, every inconsistency, except the woman who raised him. Her name was Elizabeth. She'd been with his family since he was 2. When his mother died, Elizabeth held him through the nightmares. When his father broke down, she kept the house standing. She loved him when no one else could. But Andrew never asked about her life, never wondered where she went at night. She was just there, quiet, faithful, invisible, until 3 weeks ago. Andrew noticed Elizabeth leaving his building at night carrying 2 heavy bags she didn't arrive with that morning. It kept happening. Tuesday, Thursday, Monday. Same bags, same time. His mind went dark. She's taking something. He ran an inventory check. His office, his pantry, his safe. Nothing missing. But those bags kept appearing, and the question burned, what's she hiding? So on a rainy Thursday night, Andrew decided to follow her. He left work early, parked down the block, waited. When Elizabeth walked out, coat pulled tight, bags weighing her down, Andrew's chest tightened. Tonight he'd know the truth. She took the bus south, deep into neighborhoods his company owned, blocks he'd renovated and priced families out of. She got off at 63rd Street, turned down an alley behind an old church, paint peeling, windows dark. Elizabeth knocked. The door opened, light spilled out. Andrew waited, then followed her down. The basement was full of people, homeless men, tired mothers, kids in thin coats, all eating soup from paper plates. And there was Elizabeth, hair down, old sweater, standing at a stove serving food, calling people by name, smiling like Andrew had never seen. A young man stepped up. "Miss Elizabeth, you got cornbread?" "Made it fresh, Marcus." She handed him 2 pieces wrapped in foil. A little girl tugged her sleeve. "Where does the food come from?" Elizabeth knelt down. "I make it with love, baby, so you grow strong." Andrew couldn't breathe. Those bags weren't stolen. They were given. Elizabeth was using her own money, her small paycheck, to feed people who had nothing, people his company had pushed out. She could have asked him for help, but she didn't, because after 34 years, she'd decided something about him. She didn't trust him with her mercy. Andrew stumbled back up the stairs. Rain hit his face. He waited 2 hours in his car. When Elizabeth finally came out, empty bags, slow steps, Andrew rolled down his window. "Elizabeth." She turned. No surprise, just quiet sadness. "Get in." She did. They drove in silence. Then Andrew's voice cracked. "How long?" Elizabeth stared out the window. 17 years. Since my daughter died. He'd sent flowers to that funeral, never asked how she died. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at him. "What would you have done? Made it about you?" Her voice was soft but sharp. "I wanted them to stay human, not your charity case." Something broke inside Andrew's chest. He drove her to a small house on the south side, walked her to the door. Inside, he saw a frame on the wall, a military medal, the Bronze Star, awarded to Sergeant Elizabeth M. Hart for saving 17 lives in Desert Storm. The woman who made his tea every morning was a war hero, and he never knew. Before we go on, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me where you're watching from. Because God brought this story to you today, maybe to open your eyes, maybe to heal something broken. Stay with me. What happens next will change everything. Andrew didn't go home that night. He sat in his car outside Elizabeth's house until the sun started to rise. Rain had stopped, the city was quiet, and all he could see was that medal on her wall. 17 lives. She'd saved 17 lives. And he'd never asked her a single question about who she was. When he finally drove back to his penthouse, the sun was breaking over Lake Michigan. The building let him in like it always did, gates opening, lights adjusting, elevator waiting. But this time, it all felt different, cold, empty, like a machine pretending to be a home. Andrew stood at his window looking out at the skyline, His skyline, buildings with his name carved into steel, towers that reshaped the city. But what had he really built? He thought about Elizabeth. 34 years. She'd been there his whole life. He remembered being 7 years old, standing at his mother's funeral in a suit that didn't fit right. His father couldn't even look at him. The grief was too much. But Elizabeth, she stood beside Andrew the whole time, held his hand, let him cry into her coat when no one else would. He remembered being 12, struggling with math homework at the kitchen table. His father was traveling again. The house felt too big, too quiet. Elizabeth sat with him, didn't understand the equations, but she stayed anyway, made him hot chocolate, told him he was smart enough to figure it out. He remembered being 17, the night before he left for college. She packed his bags, ironed his shirts. And when he came downstairs with his suitcase, she hugged him, the only real hug he'd gotten in years, and whispered, "Make me proud." And he had. He'd built an empire, made millions, put the Terry name on half of Chicago. But he'd never once asked if she was proud, never asked what she needed, never asked if she was okay. The realization sat in his chest like a stone. Andrew heard the front door open, soft footsteps in the hallway. Elizabeth was here, same time as always, quiet, faithful. He turned from the window and walked toward the kitchen. She was setting out his breakfast, coffee, toast, fruit cut into perfect pieces, the same routine she'd done for decades. But this morning, Andrew saw her differently. Her hands were thin, worn, hands that had served soup to strangers last night, hands that had saved lives in a war. "Good morning, Mr. Terry," she said softly, not looking up. "Elizabeth." She paused. Something in his voice made her glance at him. "Are you feeling all right, sir?" Andrew wanted to say so many things. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to ask her why she never told him, but the words caught in his throat. "I'm fine," he said quietly. "Just didn't sleep well." Elizabeth nodded, poured his coffee, set the cup down gently. And Andrew realized something that made his stomach turn. She was still calling him sir, still moving carefully around him like he was someone to serve, not someone to trust. After everything, after raising him, loving him, holding his broken pieces together, she still didn't feel safe enough to be honest with him. He'd done that, built that wall between them without even knowing it. Elizabeth turned to leave, and Andrew's voice stopped her. "Elizabeth." She turned back. "Yes, Mr. Terry?" He looked at her, really looked, and saw a stranger, a woman with a whole life he knew nothing about, a hero the world forgot, a mother who'd buried her daughter, a soldier who'd bled for her country, and he'd reduced her to someone who made his coffee. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "for everything." Elizabeth's face softened, just for a moment. Then she nodded. "Of course, sir." She walked out, and Andrew stood there alone in his perfect kitchen, in his perfect penthouse, in his perfect empire, and felt like the poorest man alive. He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar, meetings, conference calls, investment reviews, his whole day mapped out in 15-minute blocks, but none of it mattered. Andrew closed the calendar, opened his notes, and typed one question: "Who is Elizabeth Hart?" It was the first honest question he'd asked in 34 years, and he had no idea what the answer would cost him. Andrew couldn't focus. He sat in his office on the 72nd floor, staring at a contract worth $40 million. The words blurred together. All he could think about was Elizabeth. His assistant knocked. "Mr. Terry? The investors from New York are online too. Tell them I'll call back." She blinked. "But you scheduled this call 3 weeks ago." "I said I'll call back." She left quietly. Andrew leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. 17 lives. Elizabeth had saved 17 lives in a war, and he didn't even know she'd served. He opened his laptop, typed her name into the search bar. Elizabeth Hart, Desert Storm. Nothing came up. Just a few generic military records, a list of Bronze Star recipients from 1991. Her name was there, Sergeant Elizabeth M. Hart, but no story, no article, no recognition. The world had forgotten her, just like he had. Andrew shut the laptop, grabbed his coat, Told his assistant he was leaving for the day. "It's only 11:30, sir." "I know what time it is." He drove south, back to 63rd Street, back to that neighborhood he'd only seen in development reports and profit projections. In daylight, it looked different. Older women sat on porches, kids played in empty lots, a man fixed a car on the street. People lived here. Real people, not statistics. Not obstacles to progress. Andrew parked near the church, the one with peeling paint and boarded windows. In the daylight, it looked even more forgotten. A sign out front read, "Community Hope Center, all welcome." He walked around back. Down those same concrete steps, the basement door was unlocked. Inside, it was empty, quiet. Just folding tables stacked against the wall and a small kitchen in the corner. The smell of soup still lingered in the air. Andrew stood there, trying to imagine Elizabeth in this space, serving food, smiling at strangers, calling them by name. "Can I help you?" Andrew turned. A young man stood in the doorway. Same military jacket from last night. "Marcus." "I was just—" Andrew stopped. "I was looking around." Marcus studied him. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You were here last night, standing in the doorway." Andrew nodded. "You're the developer, right? The one who owns half the buildings around here." "I am." Marcus crossed his arms. "So, what are you doing here?" Andrew didn't know how to answer that. "I'm trying to understand something." "Understand what?" "Elizabeth, the woman who runs this place." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Miss Elizabeth? She doesn't run it. She just shows up. Been coming every week for years. Feeds us, talks to us, treats us like we matter." "How long have you known her?" 3 years, since I came back from Afghanistan." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I was living on the streets, couldn't hold down a job, kept having episodes. Flashbacks. Nobody wanted to deal with it." He walked over to the kitchen, touched the counter like it was sacred. "Miss Elizabeth found me sleeping behind this church one night, brought me soup, didn't ask questions, just sat with me. Let me talk when I was ready." Andrew felt something twist in his chest. "She got me into a program," Marcus continued. "Helped me find a place to stay, checked on me every week. Still does." He looked at Andrew. "She saved my life, and she didn't have to." The words hung in the air. "She saved 17 lives in the war," Andrew said quietly. Marcus turned. "What?" "In Desert Storm, she was a combat medic. Saved 17 soldiers under fire. Got the Bronze Star." Marcus stared. "She never told me that." "She never tells anyone." They stood in silence for a moment. "Why are you really here?" Marcus asked. Andrew looked around the basement, at the folding tables, the small kitchen, the handwritten sign that said, "All are welcome." "Because I've known her my whole life," Andrew said, his voice cracking. "And I just realized I don't know her at all." Marcus watched him carefully. "You're the one she works for, aren't you? The family she's been with for decades." Andrew nodded. "And you never asked?" "No." Marcus shook his head, laughed bitterly. "Man, that's something. She gives everything to people like us. And the people she actually works for, the ones who could actually help her, don't even see her." The words hit Andrew like a fist. "I see her now," Andrew said. "Do you?" Marcus challenged. "Or do you just feel guilty?" Andrew didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Marcus moved toward the door, stopped. "She comes every Thursday night, 7 o'clock. If you really want to understand, don't just visit once. Show up, stay, listen." He left. Andrew stood alone in that basement. The smell of soup, the stacked tables, the quiet. And for the first time in his life, Andrew Terry felt small. Not because of what he lacked, but because of what he'd never given. He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar. Thursday night was blocked with a gala. Investors, donors, speeches about urban development and corporate responsibility. Andrew deleted it and typed in Community Hope Center, 7 p.m. He didn't know what would happen, but he knew he couldn't walk away. Not this time. Thursday came. Andrew left his office at 6:30. His business partner called twice. He didn't answer. He drove south as the sun dropped below the skyline. The city lights flickered on. He parked near the church and sat for a moment, watching people arrive. Men in worn jackets, women holding children's hands. Everyone walking toward that basement door like it was the only warm place left in the world. Andrew got out, walked down those concrete steps, pushed open the door. Elizabeth was already there, setting up tables, arranging bowls. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore the same jeans and sweater from last week. She looked up when he entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Mr. Terry," she said finally. Her voice was careful, guarded. "I wanted to help," Andrew said. Elizabeth's eyes searched his face. "Help? If that's okay." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Soup needs stirring, pots on the stove." Andrew moved to the small kitchen, picked up the wooden spoon, stirred. People started filing in. Marcus nodded at him but didn't say anything. An older man with a cane sat down slowly. A mother with 2 kids found seats in the corner. Elizabeth moved between them like she'd done this 1,000 times, pouring soup, handing out bread, touching shoulders gently, asking quiet questions. "How's your knee, Mr. Wilson?" "Still bothering me, Miss Elizabeth. I'll bring you some cream next week." Andrew watched her. She knew everyone, remembered everything. "You gonna just stand there?" Marcus called from across the room. Andrew looked at Elizabeth. She handed him a stack of bowls. "People are waiting." He took them, started serving. It felt strange at first, awkward. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to look people in the eye without feeling the weight of everything he'd taken from them. But he tried. An older woman came through the line. Andrew ladled soup into her bowl. "Thank you, baby," she said softly. "You're welcome." She smiled, moved on. Andrew kept serving. One bowl, then another, then another. Halfway through, he noticed Elizabeth swaying slightly by the stove. She caught herself on the counter. "Elizabeth." Andrew set down the ladle, moved toward her. "I'm fine." She straightened up, wiped her forehead. But she wasn't fine. Her hands were trembling. "When's the last time you ate?" Andrew asked quietly. "I ate." "When?" She didn't answer. Andrew looked at the soup pot, then at Elizabeth. She'd made all of this, bought the groceries, cooked for hours, and hadn't saved anything for herself. "Sit down," he said. "There are still people." "Sit down, Elizabeth." Something in his voice made her listen. She sank into a chair by the wall. Andrew filled a bowl, brought it to her, set it down. "Eat." Elizabeth looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Vulnerability. She picked up the spoon, ate slowly. Andrew went back to serving. Marcus watched him with a look that wasn't quite trust, but wasn't hostility either. An hour later, the basement started to clear. People thanked Elizabeth on their way out, hugged her, told her they'd see her next week. Andrew helped clean up, stacked chairs, washed bowls, wiped down tables. Elizabeth moved slower than usual. Her shoulders sagged. When everything was done, she pulled on her coat, picked up her empty bags. "I'll drive you home," Andrew said. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." Elizabeth looked at him, then nodded. They walked to his car in silence. She got in. They drove through the dark streets. "Why did you come tonight?" Elizabeth asked quietly. Andrew kept his eyes on the road. "Because Marcus told me, if I wanted to understand, I needed to show up." "And do you understand?" Andrew thought about that, about the people he'd served tonight, the gratitude in their eyes, the way Elizabeth knew every single name. "I'm starting to," he said. They pulled up to her house. Andrew turned off the engine. "You should have told me you weren't feeling well," he said. "I'm fine." "You almost collapsed." Elizabeth looked out the window. "I've been tired before. I'll be fine." "When's the last time you saw a doctor?" She didn't answer. "Elizabeth." 3 years, she said finally. "Maybe 4. Andrew's chest tightened. "Why?" "Because doctors cost money, Mr. Terry, and I had other people to feed." The words cut through him. "The insurance I give you covers almost nothing," Elizabeth said, her voice soft but honest. "Basic checkups, emergency room if I'm dying. But tests, specialists, medicine I actually need?" She shook her head. "I chose a long time ago where my money would go. and it wasn't going to be for me. Andrew sat there, speechless. "You should go home," Elizabeth said gently. "It's late." She got out, walked to her door. Andrew sat in the car, hands gripping the wheel, watching the light in her window flicker on. And something inside him broke open. Not guilt this time. Resolve. He pulled out his phone, called his head of HR. "I need Elizabeth Hart's insurance upgraded. Full coverage. Effective immediately." "Sir, it's almost 10 at night." "I don't care what time it is. Get it done." He hung up, stared at Elizabeth's house. She'd given everything, and he'd given her nothing. That was going to change. Andrew couldn't sleep again that night. He kept thinking about what Elizabeth had said. 3 years, maybe 4, since she'd seen a doctor. While he spent thousands on suits he wore once, cars he barely drove, art he never looked at. The next morning, Andrew called his doctor's office, made an appointment for Elizabeth, full physical, blood work, everything. When Elizabeth arrived at his penthouse that afternoon, he was waiting. "Elizabeth, I need you to do something for me." She set down her bag. "Of course, Mr. Terry. I made you a doctor's appointment. Tomorrow at 10. She went still. "I don't need—" "Yes, you do. Mr. Terry, I appreciate the thought, but it's not a thought, it's happening." His voice was firm. "I've already upgraded your insurance. Full coverage, no copays, no limits." Elizabeth stared at him. Something shifted in her expression. Not gratitude, something harder. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "What? Why now, Mr. Terry? I've worked for you for 34 years, and suddenly you care about my health?" The words hung between them. Andrew felt his throat tighten. "Because I didn't know." "You didn't ask." The truth of it landed like a weight. Elizabeth picked up her bag. "I'll go to the appointment, but not because you're telling me to, because I need to keep doing what I do, and I can't do that if I collapse." She walked past him toward the kitchen. Andrew stood there, feeling the distance between them grow even as he tried to close it. Over the next few days, Andrew started spending more time at home, working from his study instead of his office, watching Elizabeth move through the penthouse with that same quiet efficiency she'd always had. But now he noticed things he'd never seen before. The way she paused at the top of the stairs, catching her breath. The way she gripped the counter when she thought no one was looking. The way her hands shook slightly when she poured his coffee. She was in pain, and she'd been hiding it for years. Wednesday evening, Andrew found her in the kitchen. She was packing containers, soup, bread, vegetables. "You're going to the center tonight?" he asked. "I go every week." "Let me help." Elizabeth didn't look up. "You helped last week. I want to help again." She stopped, set down the container, turned to face him. "Mr. Terry, I don't know what you're trying to do, but whatever this is, this sudden interest in my life, it doesn't change anything." "What do you mean?" Her eyes met his, clear, unflinching. "I've been invisible to you for 34 years. You didn't wonder where I lived, what I needed, if I was okay, and I made peace with that. I found my purpose outside of this place, outside of you." Each word was quiet but sharp. "But now you follow me, show up at the center, upgrade my insurance, make doctor's appointments." She shook her head. "And I'm supposed to be grateful? I'm trying to make things right." "You can't." Elizabeth's voice cracked slightly. "You can't undo 34 years, Mr. Terry. You can't erase the fact that you saw me every single day and never once thought to ask if I was all right, if I was lonely, if I was hurting." Andrew felt something break inside his chest. "I raised you," Elizabeth continued, her voice trembling now. "I held you when you cried, fed you when you were hungry, sat with you in the dark when the grief was too much. I loved you like my own son." Tears gathered in her eyes. "And you never even learned my middle name." The silence that followed felt like it could swallow the world. Andrew wanted to say something. Anything. But what could he say? She was right. About all of it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Elizabeth wiped her eyes, picked up the containers. "I need to get to the center. Let me drive you." "No." "Elizabeth." "No, Mr. Terry." She looked at him one more time. "You want to help? Really help? Then stop trying to fix me. Stop trying to fix your guilt. And start looking at what you've actually built, because it's not just me you've been blind to." She walked out. Andrew stood alone in the kitchen. The penthouse felt massive around him, cold, empty. He walked to the window, looked out at the city, his city, the towers with his name, the skyline he'd reshaped. And for the first time, he saw it differently. Each building was a neighborhood erased. Each tower was families displaced. Each profit margin was people pushed out of homes they'd lived in their whole lives. He pulled out his phone, opened the files for the Southside Waterfront project, the one he'd just closed, the one displacing 600 families. He started reading the reports, really reading them. Family profiles, income levels, how long they'd lived there, where they'd go when his company took their buildings. One report stood out. An elderly man named Calvin Wilson lived in the same apartment for 40 years, veteran, disabled. The buyout Andrew's company offered wouldn't even cover 6 months' rent anywhere else. Andrew scrolled down. Another name, Maria Santos, single mother, 3 kids, working 2 jobs. Losing her apartment meant pulling her kids out of their school, moving an hour away from her jobs. Another, and another, and another. 600 families, 2,000 people, real names, real lives, real loss. And Andrew had signed off on it without thinking twice. He sat down, put his head in his hands. Elizabeth was right. He hadn't just been blind to her. He'd been blind to everyone. Thursday morning, Andrew's phone rang. "Mr. Terry, this is Dr. Patel from Northwestern Memorial. You're listed as the emergency contact for Elizabeth Hart." Andrew's stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's stable, but she collapsed during her appointment yesterday. We admitted her for observation." Andrew was out the door before the doctor finished talking. He found her in a private room on the 4th floor. She was asleep, an IV in her arm, monitors beeping softly beside the bed. Andrew sank into the chair next to her. His hands were shaking. Dr. Patel came in 20 minutes later. Young, kind eyes. She pulled up a chair. "Mr. Hart." "Terry, I'm not her son. I'm her employer." Dr. Patel paused, nodded. "Elizabeth has advanced diabetes. Her kidneys are showing early damage. Her blood pressure is dangerously high, and she's severely anemic." Andrew felt the room spin. "All of these conditions are treatable," Dr. Patel continued, "but they've gone unmanaged for years. She told me she hasn't seen a doctor in over 3 years." "I know. She needs medication, specialist care, regular monitoring." The doctor looked at him directly. Her previous insurance wouldn't have covered most of this. She would have had to pay out of pocket probably $400–500 a month, maybe more. Andrew closed his eyes. "She was choosing between her health and something else," Dr. Patel said softly. "Do you know what that was?" Andrew nodded. "Feeding people who had nothing." The doctor was quiet for a moment. "She's a remarkable woman." "I know." Dr. Patel stood. "She'll need to stay here for a few days. We're getting her stabilized. But Mr. Terry, she can't keep living the way she has been. Her body won't take it." She left. Andrew sat beside Elizabeth's bed, watched her breathe, and cried. He cried for the boy she'd raised, for the man he'd become, for 34 years of not seeing her, not asking, not caring. Elizabeth stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. "Mr. Terry?" "I'm here." She looked at the IV, the monitors. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Stop," Andrew's voice broke. "Stop apologizing." She went quiet. Andrew leaned forward. His voice was raw. "Your middle name is Marie. I looked it up last night. Elizabeth Marie Hart, born in 1,955 inches, Birmingham, Alabama. You joined the army at 19, served 3 years, came home to a country that didn't want you." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "You had a daughter named Grace. She died at 28 from diabetes complications because she couldn't afford insulin." His voice cracked. "And for 17 years, you've been feeding strangers with money you should have been spending on yourself, because no one else would." Elizabeth turned her head away. "I gave you the cheapest insurance I could find," Andrew whispered. "I paid you fairly, But I never thought about what fair actually meant. I never asked if you could afford your medicine, your rent, your life. He put his head in his hands. I've spent 34 years taking your time, your love, your sacrifice, and I never once gave you anything that mattered. You gave me a job, Elizabeth said softly, a purpose. I gave you scraps. Andrew looked up at her. And you turned them into grace. You turned my indifference into love for people I was too blind to see. Tears ran down Elizabeth's face. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Andrew said, but I'm asking anyway, because I need to change, not just how I treat you, how I treat everyone. Elizabeth reached out, took his hand. Her fingers were thin and weak, but her grip was firm. Andrew, she said his name, his actual name. For the first time in 34 years, I forgave you a long time ago. Why? Because holding on to anger would have poisoned me, and I had too many people counting on me to let that happen. She squeezed his hand. But forgiveness doesn't mean things stay the same. It means you have a chance to do better. Andrew nodded. I will. I promise. Then start with this. Elizabeth looked at him with clear eyes. Stop trying to save me. I don't need saving. I need a partner, someone who sees what I see, who cares about what I care about. The people at the center, the people everywhere, Elizabeth said, the ones your buildings push out, the ones your deals forget, the ones who work for you but can't afford to live near you. Her words landed like stones. I've watched you build an empire, Andrew, and it's impressive. It really is. But empires built on other people's loss don't stand forever. They crumble. And when they do, all you're left with is money and an empty house. Andrew felt the truth of it in his bones. So if you want to change, Elizabeth said, her voice gentle but firm, then change what you're building, not just for me, for everyone. Andrew sat there, holding her hand, feeling the weight of 34 years pressing down on him, but also feeling something else. Hope. Not the kind that erases the past, the kind that makes the future possible. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Elizabeth closed her eyes, exhausted, but peaceful. Andrew stayed beside her bed until she fell asleep. Then he pulled out his phone, opened his calendar, cleared the next 2 weeks, and made a call to his lead attorney. The Southside Waterfront Project. I want every family we're displacing contacted personally. I want to know their names, their stories, where they're going, what they need. Andrew, this will take months. Then we take months. Silence on the other end. And I want a meeting with the board. Next week. I'm restructuring how we develop. Restructuring how? Andrew looked at Elizabeth sleeping peacefully, her face softer than he'd ever seen it. We're going to build with people, not on top of them. He hung up, sat back in the chair, and for the first time in his life, Andrew Terry felt like he was finally waking up. Elizabeth stayed in the hospital for 5 days. Andrew visited every morning and every evening, brought her books, sat with her in silence, learned things he should have known decades ago. Her favorite color was purple. She loved old gospel music. She'd always wanted to visit the ocean but never had the money. Small things, human things. On the 6th day, Elizabeth came home. Andrew had already arranged everything, a nurse to check on her daily, medications delivered, a schedule of follow-up appointments. But Elizabeth didn't go back to work. For the first time in 34 years, Andrew's penthouse felt empty without her. Thursday came, 7 o'clock. Andrew drove to the center alone. When he walked in, Marcus was setting up tables. He looked up, surprised. Where's Miss Elizabeth? She's recovering. Doctor's orders. Marcus's face tightened with worry. Is she okay? She will be, but she needs rest. Andrew picked up a stack of chairs, started helping. Marcus watched him for a moment, then nodded. People started arriving. Andrew served soup, handed out bread, tried to remember names the way Elizabeth did. An older man came through the line, thin, grey beard, leaning heavy on a cane. Andrew recognized him from the reports. Calvin Wilson. Evening, Andrew said, filling his bowl. Mr. Wilson nodded, took his soup to a corner table, sat down slowly, like his bones hurt. Andrew's hands went cold. This was the man, the one from the development files. 40 years in the same apartment, displaced by Terry Development, offered a buyout that wouldn't cover 3 months' rent anywhere else. Andrew set down the ladle, walked over. "May I sit?" Mr. Wilson looked up, studied him. Free country. Andrew sat. His throat felt tight. "I'm Andrew Terry." "Mr." Wilson's expression didn't change. He just kept eating his soup. "I know who you are." The words were quiet, not angry, just tired. "You bought my building," Mr. Wilson said, 2 years ago. Said you were going to renovate, make it better, and you did. New windows, fresh paint, real nice. He took another spoonful of soup. "Then you raised the rent, from $800 a month to $2,300, gave us 60 days to leave or sign a new lease we couldn't afford." Andrew couldn't breathe. "I lived there 40 years, Mr. Wilson continued, his voice steady. "Raised my son in that apartment, buried my wife from that apartment. Every morning I'd sit by that window and watch the sun come up over the lake. 40 years. He looked at Andrew. "Now I sleep in a shelter, or here, when they'll let me. Because the buyout you gave me, $12,000 for 40 years, ran out in 6 months. Andrew felt tears burn his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Mr. Wilson set down his spoon. "You sorry? Or you just feel bad now that you got a face to the name?" The question cut clean through. "Both," Andrew said, his voice breaking. Mr. Wilson studied him. "You know what the worst part is? It wasn't even personal to you. You probably signed that deal without thinking twice. Just another building, just another number. You're right." "I know I'm right, Mr." Wilson leaned back. "I was somebody before your company came. Had a home, had dignity. Now I'm just another old man with a cane, eating free soup in a church basement." Andrew put his head in his hands. "Mr. Wilson, I can't undo what I did, but I can." "Can what?" The old man's voice rose slightly. "Give me my home back. Give me my 40 years back. Give me back the morning I watched the sun come up from my window and felt like I belonged somewhere." The basement had gone quiet. People were watching. "You can't fix this with money, Mr. Wilson said. "You can write me a check right now and it won't change the fact that you looked at my life and decided it was worth less than your profit margin." Each word landed like a hammer. Andrew looked at him. This man who'd lost everything. This man whose home he'd taken without a second thought. "You're right," Andrew said. "I can't fix it, but I can stop doing it. I can change how we build. I can make sure no one else loses their home the way you did." Mr. Wilson's eyes narrowed. "Words are cheap, Mr. Terry." "I know, so let me prove it." Andrew's voice was raw. "Come work with me. Help me understand what I've been too blind to see. Tell me how to build without destroying. Because I don't know how, and I need someone who does." Mr. Wilson stared at him. Marcus stepped forward. "You serious?" "Yes." "You're going to let a homeless man tell you how to run your billion-dollar company?" "He's not homeless. He's a man I made homeless." Andrew looked at Mr. Wilson, "and he knows more about what this community needs than I ever will." The basement was silent. Mr. Wilson picked up his soup, took a slow sip, set it down. "I'll think about it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Andrew nodded, stood, walked back to the kitchen. His hands were shaking, his heart was pounding. Marcus came over, stood beside him. "That took guts," Marcus said quietly. "That was the truth." "Yeah, but most people with power don't tell the truth. They make excuses." Andrew looked at him. "I'm done making excuses." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then maybe, just maybe, you're actually serious about this." They finished serving in silence. When the night ended and everyone left, Andrew sat alone in the empty basement. The smell of soup, the stacked chairs, the quiet. He thought about Mr. Wilson. 40 years. Gone. Because Andrew signed a paper without thinking. How many others were there? How many lives had he reshaped without ever knowing their names? He pulled out his phone, called his assistant. "I need the full list of every property Terry Development has acquired in the last 10 years, and I need the displacement records. Every family, every person. I want names." "Sir, that's going to be thousands of files." "I don't care how many it is. I need to see them. All of them. He hung up, sat in the silence, and made a promise to the empty room, to Mr. Wilson, to Elizabeth, to every person his empire had forgotten. He would see them, every single one, and he would do better. Not because it was profitable, because it was right. Andrew didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study with his laptop open, files spread across the desk, names, addresses, buyout amounts, displacement dates. 10 years of development, 43 buildings acquired, over 2,000 families relocated. He started reading. James Patterson, age 62, lived in his apartment, 28 years, worked as a janitor at the same school his grandkids attended. Buyout, $14,000. Current status, moved 2 hours outside the city, lost his job, can't see his grandkids anymore. Andrew sat back, closed his eyes, kept going. Maria Santos, single mother, 3 kids, worked 2 jobs, one as a nurse's aide, one cleaning offices at night. Displacement forced her to pull her kids from their school, move to a smaller place farther from her jobs. She now spends 4 hours a day on buses just to get to work. Andrew's hands shook. He kept reading, name after name, story after story. A young couple who'd saved for 3 years to afford their first apartment, gone in 60 days. An elderly woman who'd lived in the same building since 1972, died 6 months after being displaced. Her daughter wrote in a complaint letter that she never recovered from losing her home. Andrew read that letter 3 times. Then he put his head down on the desk and wept. Hours passed. The sun rose. Andrew didn't move. His phone buzzed. A text from his business partner. Board meeting in 2 hours. You ready? Andrew stared at the message, then at the files covering his desk. He wasn't ready. He'd never be ready. But he had to face them anyway. He showered, put on a suit, drove to the office. The boardroom was full when he arrived. 8 men and women in expensive clothes, people who'd helped him build his empire, people who trusted his vision. Andrew stood at the head of the table. I'm restructuring how we develop, he said. No preamble, no small talk. His CFO leaned forward. Andrew, we talked about this. You can't just... I spent last night reading displacement records. 2,000 families in 10 years, people who lost their homes because we decided their neighborhoods had potential. His voice was steady but raw. We've been calling it development, but it's not. It's extraction. We take land from people who can't afford to fight back. We build things they can't afford to live in. And we call it progress. The room went silent. I met a man this week, Andrew continued. Calvin Wilson, 73 years old. We bought his building 2 years ago, displaced him after 40 years. The buyout we gave him ran out in 6 months. Now he sleeps in a shelter. His business partner shifted uncomfortably. Andrew, that's unfortunate, but... It's not unfortunate, it's intentional. Andrew's voice rose. We knew what would happen. The projections showed it. 60% of displaced residents would be priced out of the surrounding area. We saw that data, and we moved forward anyway. Because it was profitable, his CFO said. That's how business works. Then maybe we're in the wrong business. The room erupted, people talking over each other, arguing, questioning his judgment. Andrew let them, then he raised his hand. The room quieted. I'm proposing we build differently. Mixed income housing, community ownership models, hiring locally, profit sharing with long-term residents. We'll still be profitable, just not at their expense. This will cut our margins by 40%, his CFO said. I don't care. The investors will pull out. Then we find new investors. His business partner stood. Andrew, what's happened to you? Andrew looked at her. I woke up. To what? To the fact that I've spent 10 years building monuments to myself on top of other people's lives, and I can't do it anymore. She stared at him. This isn't sustainable. Neither is what we've been doing, not for the people we displace, not for this city, and not for my soul. The word hung in the air. Soul, not a word anyone used in boardrooms. I'm moving forward with this, Andrew said quietly, with or without your support, but I'm asking you to trust me. One more time. Long silence. Finally, one board member spoke up. Older woman, Been with the company since his grandfather's time. I'll support it. Andrew looked at her, surprised. Your grandfather built this company on relationships, she said, on knowing the people he built for. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. Maybe it's time, we remembered. Another board member nodded, then another. Not everyone. 2 members shook their heads and left the room, but 5 stayed. It was enough. Andrew's business partner looked at him. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. She sighed. Then let's figure out how to make it work. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Plans were drawn up, budgets recalculated, timelines extended. When it ended, Andrew drove straight to Elizabeth's house. She answered the door in a robe, looking stronger than she had in the hospital but still tired. Mr. Terry, is everything okay? I just came from a board meeting, Andrew said. We're changing everything. How we build, how we develop. I'm restructuring the entire company. Elizabeth studied his face. And I need your help. I need you to be part of this, not as my employee, as my partner, community relations director, full salary, full benefits, a seat at every table. Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment. Why me? Because you see people I've spent my whole life ignoring, because you've been doing this work for 17 years while I built towers. Because if I'm going to do this right, I need someone who actually knows what right looks like. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. And because, Andrew's voice cracked, you're the only person who loved me enough to keep serving people even when I didn't deserve it. You showed me what grace looks like. Now I'm asking you to help me live it. Elizabeth reached out, touched his face gently. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Andrew felt something break open in his chest. Not pain this time. Relief, purpose, hope. Thank you, he said. Elizabeth smiled. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard. Changing isn't comfortable, and people won't trust you right away. I know. But if you're serious, really serious, then we can do something beautiful. Andrew nodded. I'm serious. She looked at him with those eyes that had seen everything, that had watched him grow up, that had never stopped believing he could be better. Then let's get to work. 3 months later, Andrew stood in front of the city council. Same room where he'd presented the Southside waterfront project. Same council members who'd applauded his $340 million deal. But everything else was different. I'm here to present a revised proposal, Andrew said. Southside Commons, a community-centered development built with residents, not on top of them. He clicked to the first slide. But instead of profit projections, there were faces, names, stories. This is Calvin Wilson, 73 years old, displaced by my company 2 years ago. He's now our community advisory director. He's helping us redesign this project from the ground up. Mr. Wilson sat in the front row, nodded once. This is Maria Santos, single mother, 3 kids. We displaced her family 18 months ago. She's now our family services coordinator, making sure no family loses their home without real support and options. Maria sat next to Mr. Wilson. Her eyes were wet, but her chin was high. Andrew continued. The new Southside Commons will be 40% affordable housing, 30% workforce housing, 30% market rate. Every displaced family has been offered first right to return not as tenants, but as partial owners. The council members leaned forward. We're hiring locally, training programs for construction jobs, microloans for small businesses, a community center with free programs run by the people who live there. He paused. This project will take longer, cost more upfront. And yes, our profit margins will be smaller, but we'll be building something that lasts, something that serves. One council member raised her hand. Mr. Terry, this is a significant departure from your previous model. Yes, ma'am. What changed? Andrew looked at Elizabeth, sitting quietly in the back row. I did. The vote was unanimous. Approved. When Andrew walked out, Mr. Wilson was waiting. You did good in there, the old man said. We did good, Andrew corrected. Mr. Wilson smiled. First time Andrew had ever seen it. Yeah, we did. Over the next few months, something remarkable happened. Andrew started showing up, not just at board meetings, not just at galas, but at the places that mattered. Every Thursday, he was at the center, serving soup, learning names, listening to stories. Every Monday, he met with the Community Advisory Board residents.